Hey guys, it's Dwayne here. So today I have a really special guest with us today. I have James Snapp Jr. with us, and in case you don't know who he is, he has done a tremendous amount of work arguing for what he calls reasoned eclecticism. Not the typical stuff that we see, but the kind of eclecticism that takes all of the manuscript evidence into consideration. So James is known for his staunch defense of the long ending of Mark, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So if you don't know a whole lot about something, you know what you do? You get an expert to tell you about it. And that's who James is. He's an expert on the evidence when it comes to showing that there's more to the long ending of Mark than we typically hear about. So, James, why don't you take a second, wave hello to everybody.
Hello.
There we go. And why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into textual criticism? I don't know. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, just from a basic interest in what is in identifying and confirming the original text of the New Testament, I began my interest in about 1986. Studied a little book by Christoph Lake called The Text of the New Testament, and kind of continued from there. There wasn't a whole lot of emphasis in my training for the ministry at Cincinnati Bible College, but with the library there and also with my own resources, I've been studying the field of textual criticism and attempting to keep up to date on the issues involved up to the present day. And in the meantime, I minister at the Curtisville Christian Church at curtisvillecc.com. There are various resources that I provided that anybody can get on there and select from the list of links that I provided to see discussions not only about Mark 16 through 20, but also about some other important passages of the New Testament that are drawn into question.
Nice. So you have your own blog online where you share a whole bunch of stuff, just anything really textual related. It's called the textofthegospels.com. Is that right?
Yes, the textofthegospels.com. And there I try to use what I call equitable eclecticism. Unlike most of what is called reasoned eclecticism, equitable eclecticism takes the Byzantine text a lot more seriously. It takes the proclivities of the Alexandrian text to minimize rather than to expand, and also it takes into consideration what James Royce discovered or confirmed, which was that copyists early on tended to omit more than add, which basically reverses what was a fundamental principle of textual criticism up to that time, at least in some circles, the circles that promote what used to be called the Westcott and Hort text. It's basically still the same text, but it goes by a different name. The Nestle-Aland Text or the UBS text.
Okay. And just for the sake of our viewers, what do you mean by the Nestle-Aland text? What is that?
Nestle-Aland Text is the text, the compilation now in its 28th edition. This is the 27th that I'm holding here, but it's the base text that is basically the what the modern text of, say, the Revised Standard Version and the NIV, the ESV, the Christian Standard Bible, and other versions like that have come along relatively recently. It's their base text. The New King James is another version, but its base text is significantly different. It's more similar to the base text of the King James. Not quite identical, but very, very close to identical.
Mm-hmm. So the Nestle-Aland then is basically a Greek New Testament that underlies most of the modern translations that we see today. And you mentioned a couple by name, like the CSB, the NIV, and so on and so forth. And then you sort of juxtapose that against the Textus Receptus, which is another Greek New Testament, which has some slight variations in it, which undergirds the King James Version and the New King James Version.
Yes. The King James Version was based on the text that proceeded from the 1500s, the work of Erasmus, but not just Erasmus. It's important to also realize the contribution that Stephanus and Beza had in the compilation that became the basis of King James Version. There's also the EOB, Eastern Orthodox New Testament, which is the same general line, but avoids the quirk readings that we have in the Textus Receptus. In the Textus Receptus, you have some readings that are very poorly supported, a few readings that aren't even supported at all.
Like the tree, is it the tree of life in Revelation versus the book of life?
Yeah, I would say it has no support, but no Greek support.
Yeah.
But also the places in Acts 9:6 where there's no Greek support. But generally the EOB does what Erasmus was trying to do, which is to approximate what is the main line of manuscripts that's handed down through the church. So we have now the EOB as well.
Is that a Greek Bible as well? The EOB?
What I'm holding is an English Bible.
Oh, okay.
But it's based on the Greek text of 1904, the patriarchal text.
Is that the Antoniades text?
Antoniades, yeah, that's exactly the same thing.
Oh, very good.
Well,
Very good.
1904 and 1912, there were a few little things ironed out, but that's basically the same line.
All right, good.
That's the Byzantine text. Well, you have in the Nestle-Aland, you have even though the ESV's preface, you would think that it's connected textually, that it's the same kind of text you have when you have the King James. But in real life, though, the English Standard Version is based on, with very few exceptions, the same text that the NIV is based on, which is what I'm holding here.
Right.
There are a few variations. It's not technically correct to say that it's based exactly on this compilation, but it's very, 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 very close.
Yeah, one thing I learned recently actually about the ESV version is I had no idea that Crossway, the producers of the ESV, had made an agreement with the Gideon Bible Society when it came to distributing Bibles, and they had actually included in the Gideon Bibles those readings which are typical to Byzantine text because of the philosophy of the Gideon Bibles. So there's actually a kind of more Byzantine text English Standard Version out there than is currently on the market right now. I didn't know that, but that's really interesting. It'd be interesting to get a hands on one of those.
When that came out, I think I posted on my blog, textofthegospel.com. There was a blog. I think the title of it is "The ESV versus the ESV," comparing the two different editions, and the differences are significant. Although they don't go as far toward the Byzantine text, not really as far as you might think, but they do at least address the text for the verse numbers. But when a whole verse is missing, in that edition of the ESV, they do have a verse where there is no verse in the usual ESV.
Yeah. And I guess I'd want to make it plain for those who are listening to us. And we talk about differences between the current Nestle-Aland 28 and the Textus Receptus. We're not talking about an entire brand new book. We would be hard pressed to say that the Textus Receptus is a different Bible than the Nestle-Aland Text. The differences, for the most part, are fairly trivial and fairly minor. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on one of the major ones, which is the long ending of Mark. So this is Mark chapter 16, verses 9 to 20. James, if I'm not mistaken, you have written a book about this. It was like a research paper. Like there's a tremendous amount of information in there for reasons why we should not be discluding. I just made up that word, discluding. Why we shouldn't be removing that portion of the Bible. So James, what is it about the long ending of Mark? Why do you think, what is it about it that causes people to say, no, it's not original. We don't. Why?
I think to a large extent, the degree of misinformation that has been distributed about it. For instance, in some older Bibles, there were claims in the footnotes that said many manuscripts omit verses 9 through 20. Well, of course, the average reader, seeing this, thinking that his Bible makers know what they're talking about, when he sees a claim in the Bible that says many manuscripts omit verses 9 through 20, he's going to think, wow, many manuscripts omit verses 9 through 20, so that means it's not, so the implication is it's not original, right? When people see in the NIV a footnote, or rather a heading note above verse 9, that tells them something to the effect that the oldest and most reliable manuscripts don't have verses 9 through 20, and that's all they're told, the impression is, well, the seed of doubt is planted to say, well, we shouldn't really rely on these verses very much. We shouldn't really treat it the way we treat what we think of as the real Bible. This one, there's questions about. And so, although we're told in Scripture that Scripture is given for the reasons that God gave it, when it comes to versions or verses that have these questions about them, they tend to just shy back and say, well, we're not sure about that, so let's not stand on that ice too firmly.
Mm-hmm.
But when even today, I think that there is a Bible today, or a Bible, what I call a hyper translation, called the Message. You might have heard of it.
Yes.
When it comments in the footnotes on Mark 16:9-20, they claim in the Message today, and I think the Message has been out there for a while. People could be informed if they wanted to be informed, but its footnote says that Mark 16:9-20 is contained only in later manuscripts. That's an exact quote from the Message's footnote.
And it's totally, like, it's completely deceptive, right?
Let the reader beware when they say it's contained only in later manuscripts. When you see notes that say, "Oh, well, the earliest and most reliable don't have it," I have a list here of the manuscripts that they're excluding from the list of most reliable or best. And
Right.
I think you have a slide there, slide number 12. You notice that the first one listed here is Codex A. That's Codex Alexandrinus. And next to that is Codex C. That's Codex Ephraemi Scriptus. Next to that is D, which is a drastically different form of the text from A or from C. And going on from there, we have Codex E, Codex G, Codex H, K, M, S, U, V, L, W, X, Y, Gamma, Delta, Theta, Pi, Sigma, Omega, 047, 02. These are unsealed manuscripts.
Yeah. So
ancient.
So these are like the old ones that would have been written on parchment.
Each one of these would be considered old. Yes, these are all parchment manuscripts. These are all unsealed manuscripts, the ones I've just described.
Right. And when you say unseal, you're talking about the Greek letters being all capitals and a long string, no spaces, no punctuation, just letter after letter after letter. Yeah.
And but also, I think when we see this the minuscules online, here are the minuscules, and I'll just let the evidence sink in. Of this is the list of the minuscules manuscripts, Greek manuscripts that include at least part of verses 9-20. Now, I haven't gone through every single one and double checked to make sure, yes, it has the entire passage. It's entirely possible that one Jew might not have the entire passage, but when the manuscripts were pristine, the implication is that they had the passage entire. So there's those, but that's not all. If you have slide 13,
yeah,
you can put that up, and here we have a more extensive list of the manuscripts that have Mark 16:9-20. These are the manuscripts that have Mark 16:9-20. Now, some might say, well, we don't count manuscripts. We have to weigh them, right? And we do. But in the process of weighing them, that's not an excuse to simply pretend that they don't exist. That's not an excuse to hide this evidence, as if each one of these manuscripts does not have an ancestry. These manuscripts did not spring out of the ground from like the mythical dragon's teeth. These manuscripts have a history to tell. Slide 14, I think, to continue the list a bit.
Sure.
Just so people don't get the idea of, oh, it's just in a few manuscripts.
Yeah.
Here's slide 14. But slide 14 is not the end. There's also slide 15. And so you can see about 1,643 manuscripts support the inclusion of Mark 16:9-20. Probably you could expand on that a bit more. There's probably been a few more manuscripts discovered since this count was made. Also, Mark 16:9-20 was featured in the lectionary of the church as one of the Hiothenon readings, early morning readings that all pertain to the resurrection. It was the third Hiothenon.
What do you mean by third Hielothenon?
There was a series of readings in the lectionary called the Hiothena or the Hiothenon.
Okay.
But those 11 passages all pertained to the resurrection of Christ, or things that happened after the resurrection. And those 11 readings had a special status. They were kind of separated and given a special place in the readings that the church would regularly use to focus on things that happened after the resurrection. So you might have, say, a copy of Matthew that might not even have Mark's text, but it might have the reference to these parts of Matthew being the Hiothenon. Well, a Gospels manuscript wouldn't have a reference to the first Hiothenon if it wouldn't have included all the other references as well. So that can be indirectly considered. Now, who knows how many other indirect references?
Right, right.
Here are the ones that can be definitely confirmed, because you can just, for a lot of them, you can go online to manuscript collections and just look at them and see, yes, it has Mark 16:19-20. And in all of the collections that are online, all the references that are available, in all of the manuscripts that have been researched, there have been some that were at first identified as manuscripts that didn't have Mark 16:19-20. 14:20 would be one. I think William Lane, in his commentary, mentioned another one. But as it turns out, those manuscripts were simply damaged by the format of the page and by the codicological. Well, I'm kind of getting technical here, but by comparing the pages to the surrounding pages, the implication is that it was there and it's been taken away by damage. In one case, intentional theft, because there was an illustration on the opposite side of the page.